Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 26th session of PD in Your Pocket. My name is Rachel, and I'm delighted to be welcoming you to this session on the Child Safe Standards in Family Daycare. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country on which we meet today. I know we are on many different lands with many traditional owners, but I'm currently presenting on the land of the Wangal and Gadigal people. And I'd like to acknowledge them and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I'd like to pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge that Aboriginal families have cared and educated children on this land for tens of thousands of years. So welcome again. And firstly, I wanted to acknowledge and thank you for your ongoing commitment to quality outcomes for children, families, and each other. So I know most of you would have been up super early this morning to open your services, and to be here tonight for a late night webinar is really commendable. Now, I know many of you have been participating in PD in Your Pocket from day one, but for those of us that are joining us, and you might be new here, I'm just going to go through how it works. So when you registered, you got sent a link for a specially prepared booklet, and that was at the beginning of the month. So you had about 2 weeks to read it, and it was accessible to you on your phone or your iPad or your computer. Now, if you didn't receive it, you can find the QR code link here on your screen if you're watching this presentation tonight. However, if you're listening as a podcast, the link is www.newsouthwales.fdc.org.au/PD-in-a-pocket/play. Now, professional development, this is it. You'll either be participating in this webinar live, watching it as a video, or listening to it as a podcast. If you are participating in it live, remember you can always go to the PD in Your Pocket page, and that's on our website, and you can watch or listen to something again later if you missed it the first time. Now, for those that are participating in it live, this session will also include an interview with an expert on the child safe standards. And if you're watching as a video or listening as a podcast, that link to that interview is available on the website. Then for those that are participating live here now, there'll be some time at the end to ask some questions. Or alternatively, you can use the Q&A box during this session to ask any questions related to the child safe standards. Now, your certificates of participation will be emailed to you within a week. You might need to check your junk mail if after a week you still haven't received it. And if you still haven't, please contact professional services at newsouthwalesfdc.org.au. Now, when you enrolled, we invited you to join a closed Facebook group with other educators and FDC people. You can discuss the topic with them, you can tell them what you do at your service, and you can find out what they do at theirs. But please keep in mind that this session does discuss child safety. So if you do want to share anything on the Facebook page group, make sure you are upholding children's rights, which includes respecting their privacy. Now, if you have any questions about PD in Your Pocket, you can always email info@nswfdc.org.au. When you registered for this session, we asked you some poll questions to gain a bit more of an understanding of where you were at when it came to implementing the child safe standards. Now, 83% of you said that you are aware of the child safe standards. That's fantastic. And 16% of you know a little. So let's see if we can improve that by the end of today's session. Now, this is impressive. 93% of you are already implementing the child safe standards in your service. So well done. We'll be looking forward to hearing more from you tonight as you share what you do to implement the standards in your service. Does your service have a child safe policy? So 95% of you said yes, 1% said no, and 4% said unsure. So if you have answered no or unsure, we will be sharing a link to a template for a child safe policy that you can use. If you had concerns for a child's welfare, how confident do you feel to report this? So 73% of you said that you are very confident. 26% said you're kind of aware about what's required, and 1% said you're not confident at all. Now, for those that are unsure, today's session is all about giving you the tools to create a culture of child safety from within your organisation so that you can be confident in yourself when it does come to reporting concerns. Now, how confident do you feel about applying the child safe standards to your family daycare service? Now, 59% of you said you are confident and aware of the compliance around the child safe standards. And I'm going to ask this question again at the end of the session, and I'm hoping we'll see 100% there. So let's look at what we are covering tonight. We're going to look at what are the child safe standards. We're going to look at the laws and regulations. We're going to briefly look at what child protection is versus what child safety is. We're going to define what a child safe organisation is and how to know if we are running one. We're going to unpack the 10 child safe standards. We're going to look at the online child safe assessment tool, and I've linked a whole bunch of resources there which can hopefully help you on your journey. To begin, I think it's important that we first have an understanding of the role of the Office of Children's Guardian and the part they play in the advocacy of child safety. So the Office of the Children's Guardian, or the OCG, is an independent statutory body that promotes the interests, safety and rights of the children and young people in New South Wales. So the core function of the OCG includes administering, working with children's checks, the reportable conduct scheme, and the implementation of the child safe standards. So under new laws that just passed in the New South Wales government, the OCG now has additional powers to monitor and investigate how organisations, which include family daycare services, implement the standards to support the safety and wellbeing of children and young people. So let's look at what the child safe standards are. The child safe standards provide a framework for creating a child safe organisation. They are designed to drive cultural change to create, maintain and improve child safe practices. When organisations apply the standards, they build a culture where abuse of children is prevented, responded to and reported. Now, it's good to have a brief history of why we have the child safe standards. So in 2015, the Royal Commission completed their investigation into child sexual abuse in institutions. The Royal Commission recognised that commitment is needed to prevent the harm of children, thus the creation of the child safe standards. The child safe standards provide a framework for making organisations safer for children. They have been accepted by the New South Wales government and are based on extensive research and consultation. The standards provide practical guidance for family daycare services to create cultures, adopt strategies, and act to put the interest of children first, and of course, to keep them safe from harm. Now, who do the child safe standards apply to? So for the answer to this, we need to have a look at the laws and regulations. The child safe standards apply to all entities listed in the Children's Guardian Act of 2019. So if we look at the Act, the family daycare services fall under Schedule 1.6, an approved education and care service within the meaning of the Children National Law, or the Children's Supplementary Provisions Act of 2011. Some other examples of organisations that do fall under this category are the Department of Education, so that includes government and non-government schools. You have outside school hours care, which some of you also fall under. I know you do take children before and after care as well. Hospitals and healthcare services. And children's sport and recreation services. So that's places like swim schools, football clubs, and dance schools. Any agencies that are providing substitute residential care for children, and adoption services. Now, I'm just going to navigate the chat. Now, I also just want to note that some of these here are relevant laws and regulations that align closely with child safety, but they're just some of them. Now, the national law requires approved providers, nominated supervisors, and family daycare educators to ensure every reasonable precaution is taken to protect children from harm and from any hazard likely to cause injury. And that comes from section 167. Now, under the Education and Care Services national law and national regulations, an approved provider must ensure that policies and procedures are in place for providing a child-safe environment, and that's Regulation 168. They must take reasonable steps to ensure these policies and procedures are followed. So that's under Regulation 170. And you must ensure that children are encouraged to express themselves and their opinions, and that falls under Regulation 155. Now, all children have the right to experience quality education and care in a safe and healthy environment, so be it physical, emotional, or social. Your policy should provide a very clear set of guidelines to ensure that children at the service are provided with a safe environment at all times, and your approved providers, nominated supervisors, and educators, and all your other staff at the service meet their legislative obligations to prevent harm and hazard towards children, and that there is a timely and effective identification of and response to children who may be at risk or who are experiencing abuse or neglect. So when developing your policies and procedures for providing a safe environment, you'll need to consider the physical environment, you'll need to consider your staffing, your supervision, and your child protection requirements. So earlier this year, some compliance measures did come into play. On the 1st of February, enforcement measures were put into place for family daycare operators to comply with the child safe standards in their service. So this includes if you have children in your home before school and after school. So some of you may have started that already, which we know from our poll earlier, or some of you may be feeling overwhelmed on where to start. So in tonight's webinar, we are going to break down the 10 child safe standards and how to use the standards through your systems and policies and processes to continually improve child safe capabilities in your home. So when organisations do not comply with the child safe standards, the Office of Children's Guardian can issue compliance notices to the organisation, or they can accept enforceable undertaking from your organisation. So what that means, an enforceable undertaking is a written agreement of what the organisation should or should not be doing. And then if an organisation does fail to comply with the notice or the enforceable undertaking, the OCG may issue penalties. Now, the goal of the OCG is to work with organisations to be compliant. So this is not scary. They're not here to punish you. It's all about improvement. Now, this is what the 10 child safe standards look like. So we've got number 1, child safety is embedded in organisational leadership, governance, and culture. Number 2, children participate in decisions affecting them and they are taken seriously. Number 3, families and communities are informed and involved. Number 4, equity is upheld and diverse needs are taken into account. 5, people working with children are suitable and supported. 6, processes to respond to complaints of child abuse are child-focused. 7, staff are equipped with knowledge, skills and awareness to keep children safe through continual education and training. 8, physical and online environments minimise the opportunity for abuse to occur. 9, implementation of the child safe standards is continuously reviewed and improved. And 10, policies and procedures document how the organisation is child safe. So the child safe standards identify the 10 elements that work together to make organisations safer. The good thing is that these standards are flexible, which is great news for family daycare educators, as your context differs from that of other early childhood education services. So these are some guides that you can reference. The first one is a guide to the child safe standards and is available to download from the OCG website. And implementing the child safe standards in early childhood and outside school hours services. And that's available from the New South Wales Department of Education. So the guide to the child safe standards and implementing the child safe standards describe what it means to be a leader in a child safe organisation, how to involve children in decisions that affect them, what policies and procedures you should have, and how child-friendly reporting processes help ensure children are safe. Now, these are wonderful guides to give you an idea of performance evidence. So that means what the standards should look like in actions or what behaviours you might see when this is implemented effectively. They also have some excellent reflective questions to help you identify any gaps in your service. Now, most of our resources tonight are linked with a QR code. So I'll try and leave the slides up for as long as possible so you can pull your phone out and give it a quick scan. If not, all these links are still available on your booklet. So if I've gone too fast or you've missed it, just go back to the booklet. Understanding the child safe standards. The Royal Commission's outcome on child safe standards and organisations is underpinned by Article 3 of the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child. So Article 3 states all organisations concerned with children should work towards what is best for each child. The child safe standards are a benchmark against which family daycare services can assess their child safe capabilities and set performance targets. The standards work together to articulate what makes a child safe environment. All the standards are of equal importance and they are interrelated. So they should be read holistically and not in isolation, as there are lots of necessary overlaps. The standards can cut across or be relevant to all the other standards, as you'll see tonight. The standards are designed to be principle-based and focused on outcomes and changing workplace culture. So it's not about setting strict rules that must be followed or specific initiatives that must be implemented. And this is to enable the standards to be dynamic and responsive and be flexible to the changing needs of the organisation. Now let's have a look at how these standards have been designed to positively impact your service. So they've been designed to help drive cultural change in family daycare services and organisations. When we say cultural change, it means to encourage employees to adopt behaviours and mindsets that are consistent with services goals and values of child safety. They're designed to be principle-based and outcome-focused. So let's think back to the 10 standards that we just looked at. They are a series of tangible and practical applications that you can embed into your family daycare service. And the outcomes of these should be measurable. So for example, a new employee code of conduct is implemented, or your service has completed the child safety self-assessment tool, and the outcome of that has been considered in your practices. They're designed to be flexible enough so that they can be adapted by organisations of varying sizes and characteristics. So for example, the standards can be applied in family daycare services, or they can be applied to large primary schools and still be just as effective. They're designed to avoid placing undue burden on organisations, help organisations address multiple risks. They're there to help you balance caution and caring. And they're there to be a benchmark against which organisations can assess their child-safe capabilities and set these performance targets. And of course, as we're going to mention a few times tonight, they are all of equal importance and they are interrelated. Now, you may be wondering what the difference between child protection and child safe is. Child protection is about how you respond to a high-risk situation. So it's your legal responsibility as a mandatory reporter to report to the police if you believe a child is being abused or harmed. Child protection describes what you can do so that child harm is less likely to happen and that the perpetrators are more likely to be caught. Whereas child safe is about creating a culture of child safety from within your organisation so that harm and abuse are less likely to happen and children are supported in communicating about their safety. Now, the rest of this presentation will guide you on how to create this culture. Now, we've used the term child safe organisation a few times tonight. So let's have a look at what that means. A child safe organisation creates cultures, adopts strategies, and act to prevent harm to children, including sexual abuse. The Australian and New Zealand Children's Commissioners and Guardians define the child safe organisation as one that systematically creates conditions to reduce the likelihood of children being harmed. It creates conditions that increases the likelihood of identifying and reporting harm and responds appropriately to disclosures, allegations, and suspicions of harm. So now let's have a look at how we can implement these 10 child safe standards into your family daycare services to ensure your organisation is child safe. So we're going to start from the beginning. Standard 1. Child safety is embedded in organisational leadership, governance, and culture. A child safe organisation is committed to child safety. This is demonstrated in its leadership and in the way the organisation is managed and by the day-to-day activities that it carries out. A child safe organisation drives cultural change in the way that things are done and how issues and risks are managed. Now, the child safe standards also link to the national quality standards. So standard 1 links to quality area number 2, children's health and safety. It also links to quality area 4, which is staffing arrangements, and quality area 7, which is governance and leadership. Now, this standard is all about leadership. So in this context, when I say leadership, I'm talking about coordinators, approved providers, perhaps your owner. And leaders play a vital role in creating and maintaining a culture where children's rights and safety are prioritised. They ensure all staff understand that keeping children safe is everyone's responsibility, and they make sure that staff know what is expected of them. So let's look at how a good leader can make sure that there are clear rules and procedures to ensure that all staff are aware and that they all consistently strive for a child-safe environment. So what this might look like is you as a leader have regular contact with your educators, ensuring that there is enough allocated time to discuss child safety. It's about ensuring family daycare educators and coordinators complete child protection training prior to commencing employment and undertake annual refresher training. It's about supporting educators to attend other child safe professional development, supporting all family daycare educators and staff to confidently describe their services' commitment to child protection. Celebrate National Child Protection Week or Safer Internet Day and other events with children that specifically promote child safety. And of course, when we talk about championing a child-safe cultural change, this should be through your attitudes, behaviours and actions. For example, promoting and living the code of conduct and setting the standard of behaviour for your organisation. Now, I just want to pause with a question break, and this one is targeted to our leaders participating here tonight. So I urge you to use the chat to answer this question. If you are an approved provider or coordinator, how are you championing a child-safe culture in your organisation? So leaders, I'll just give you 30 seconds to a minute to pop in the chat your answers, and I'll start to read them as they come through. So Sangan Preet has said providing multicultural programs. Talgati has said by creating the awareness among the team and encouraging them to talk about it with families and communities. Wonderful. Tatiana has said regular visits to educators. That's fantastic. And I have some other suggestions here. You may have policies and procedures that cover the creation of a child-safe culture and the use of online environments. So we also need to consider both physical and online. Your staff perhaps follow the code of conduct and all child-safe procedures. Your decision-making prioritizes children. Organizational culture creates an environment where it is difficult for abuse to occur, and staff appropriately respond to and report child abuse. And I'm seeing a few answers here about maintaining a safe and healthy environment, which is wonderful. Standard 2, children participate in decisions affecting them and are taken seriously. So children are safer when organisations teach them about their rights to be heard, their right to be listened to, and their right to be believed. A child-safe organisation actively seeks the opinions of children, and when doing so, considers their age, development, maturity, understanding, abilities, and how they communicate. Children are encouraged and supported to regularly contribute to decisions that do affect them. Now, Standard 2 refers to Quality Area 1, Educational Program and Practice, and Quality Area 5, Relationships with Children. Now, let's look at some examples of opportunities that we can give children to help them feel encouraged and empowered to speak up and, of course, be believed. So what we can do as educators is introduce children to their own protective rights by respecting their physical space and only using touch when necessary and appropriate. Support children's early understanding of consent by acknowledging and respecting a child's right to refuse or to say no. Teach children formal names for their body parts so that if abuse does occur, the disclosure is clear. Children are aware of who to tell if they feel like they're in danger, and talk to children about emotions and how their bodies might feel. So how their bodies feel when they're happy, sad, scared, or perhaps excited. And ask children if they feel safe in their educator's home and how they could feel safer. Now, this standard also links to the early years learning framework, which is belonging, being and becoming. And it links to outcome 1.1, children feel safe, secure and supported. Now, here's another example of an activity of how to introduce the concept of safety. And this is called the 5-finger safety network. And you may have heard of it. So you ask children to trace their hand and name 5 people they feel safe to talk to about anything. Some children may be specific and say mum, dad, or Auntie Jane. Or some children may suggest protective services like the police officers. Now, during this activity, it's a good opportunity to talk about feelings and physical reactions associated with feelings of being safe or feelings of being unsafe. It's about teaching children who they can talk to and where they can go. And you can also gauge if children feel safe or unsafe at the service. Children's feedback in these activities can inform your risk management planning and your policies and procedures. So if you follow this QR code down the bottom, it also takes you to a printable version of this resource. We also have the Safe Book series. Now, the OCG has developed a series of 4 children's books known as the Safe series. The series has been developed as a tool for child-related workers who want to introduce the concept of personal safety in a non-confrontational way, and they're targeted for children under the age of 6 years old. Each book includes a theme that works in conjunction with the other books in the series, and it can be used as a way of teaching children about what is referred to as protective behaviours. So that is behaviours that will keep them safe from harm or abuse. The Safe series intends to reduce incidences of abuse by removing the secrecy abusers rely on as a tool to offend against children. It also helps children understand their emotions, particularly when they feel sad or scared or perhaps upset. By using the Safe series, adults can help children develop the ability to communicate when they feel safe or unsafe. And this is an excellent resource that you can share with not only your children, but also your families and your fellow educators. Now, all of the resources that we have linked here tonight from the OCG are, of course, free. Standard 3. Families and communities are informed and involved. So staff in child safe organisations understand that parents, carers, and other important people in children's life have primary responsibility for raising children and raising their children. So a child safe organisation talks to, consults with, and invites the participation of families, caregivers, and the broader community to promote rights of children. Standard 3 links to Quality Area 1, Educational Program and Practice, Quality Area 3, Physical Environment, and Quality Area 6, Collaborative Partnerships with Families and Communities. Let's have a look at some ways that we can ensure that families are informed about all child safety and protective learning that you are teaching children in your care. So some ways to do this would be to ensure current information about how your service promotes child safety is readily available to your families, as well as relevant community services and resources. So you may do this in your weekly or monthly updates, and also invite families to give feedback. You can send regular, strong child safe messages via your online platform. So an example of this is, say you did do the experience of the 5-finger safety network, or you have introduced the Safe Book series. You could document this as a standalone post. So it's not just added as an experience to your daily diary. And this shows that you do take child safety seriously and it is important. You can have dedicated child protection and safety sections on your website, or if you use social media, or in your newsletters. You can ensure that families are aware of your policies and that they know where to find them. And ensure families and carers are aware of the code of conduct at your service and agree to abide by it at all points. Families should feel comfortable approaching their child's educator with any concerns regarding child safety. Some families, however, may feel more comfortable speaking to a coordinator with any concerns. Now, I just want to break quickly for another reflective question. In your service, who can families talk to raise any issues? So I'll just give you guys about 30 seconds or so if you want to pop your answer in the chat. Yep, so we have educator, coordinator, provider, directly with the educator or your CDC, service provider or coordinator, educators, complaints officer, or your CDO. Wonderful, fantastic answers there, everyone. Standard 4, equity is upheld and diverse needs are taken into account. A child-safe organisation provides culturally safe and child-friendly services. So it pays close attention to equity by taking into account children's diverse circumstances. A child-safe organisation recognises that children are vulnerable, but that some are more vulnerable to abuse than others and may find it difficult to reveal or be understood when communicating that they have been abused. This standard links to quality area 1, 3, 5, 6, and 7. Standard 4 encourages organisations to consider the diverse needs of children. General child safety policies and procedures sometimes overlook the need of culturally diverse children and young people. The Royal Commission found that these children can experience heightened vulnerability because of their circumstances and require a more considered approach. So, for example, First Nations children may be less likely to disclose abuse because of a lack of cultural safety or fear of authorities intruding into their families and communities. And this, of course, is based on historic experiences of systemic racism and abuse. Applying the child safe standards allows organisations to pay closer attention to the cultural safety of children. Organisations are encouraged to engage with communities to ensure that their child safe approaches do reflect the diverse needs of the children and the communities that they serve. The Royal Commission's findings identified that children from these groups are more vulnerable to abuse. So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, culturally and linguistically diverse children, children with disabilities, gender diverse children, children from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, children living with one parent or no parents, and children who have experienced prior abuse or maltreatment. How can we address these vulnerabilities in your family daycare services? So some ways that we can do that is adapt how we respond to the diverse needs of children, make it clear in the policies and procedures, treat every case individually and not as blanket care. You may need to budget for additional resources and also prioritise staff professional development. Let's look at how we can promote an inclusive environment for children in your care and what opportunities we can provide them to participate to their full potential based on these individual needs. We can ensure that you are aware of and discuss the range of diversity at your service. Ensure the physical environment contains positive images that are representative of a range of cultures and abilities. Celebrate events that highlight Aboriginal culture and history, for example, National Apology Day, Reconciliation Week, and NIDOC Week. You can invite people from your local community to provide education that is relevant to your country that your service is on. So, for example, Gadigal land. Celebrate diversity and significant cultural events such as International Day of Persons with Disabilities, Chinese New Year, or Ramadan. Incorporate celebrations and recognition of events and festivals that are relevant to your children and families. Seek input from children with disability and their families about the design and delivery of your service and the best way to encourage children and families to voice their concerns. Create culturally safe environments for children from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. and develop and implement a reconciliation action plan that's also known as a RAP. Standard 5. People working with children are suitable and supported. Now, this standard is all about your human resources management. So that includes screening and recruitment and performance reviews. And these all play a vital role in protecting children from harm. Child safe organisations make sure child safety is prioritised when they are selecting and managing staff. They recognise that verified working with children's check is an important step, but that other screening practices must also be used. Standard 5 relates to Quality Area 2, Children's Health and Safety, and Quality Area 7, Governance and Leadership. When it comes to your education and care services recruitment processes, there are some steps that need to be taken to attract, recruit, supervise, and support staff to keep children safe. So this is about ensuring that you maintain an up-to-date record of your working with children's checks. These, of course, are validated on the Office of the Children's Guardian website. And if cleared, the check will be valid for 5 years. However, applicants are continuously monitored. Providing safeguards, such as all members of the household have working with children's checks and police checks. And keep in mind that working with children's checks apply to adults. So if you live with teenagers, perhaps they're 17, about to turn 18, once they turn 18, they also do need a working with children's check as well. Ensure all staff or volunteers receive an appropriate induction to the service prior to beginning their working with children. Now, many service providers have induction checklists, and this is an excellent idea. Make sure you're covering everything. And it's the responsibility of both the staff and the volunteers to be aware of any child protection law and any obligation held under it. Ensure children and families are informed about any staff changes. Ensure you are aware of reporting, your reporting requirements and how to raise any concerns related to child safety. And seek support and clarification in understanding the services, policies and procedures. So many services review their policies yearly and invite staff and family for feedback, and this is best practice. Now, we've mentioned code of conduct a few times tonight, and this is another way that we can ensure all staff are aware of their responsibilities in ensuring the protection of children, and that is to develop a child-safe code of conduct. So you may be thinking, why do I need to make a code of conduct if I'm already following the child-safe standards? Well, under the Children's Guardian Regulation of 2022, it requires an authorised employer to develop a child-safe code of conduct. Now, the purpose of the child-safe code of conduct is to outline the minimum expected behaviours and expectations between workers and children as part of your commitment to creating a safe environment. The code of conduct is signed by staff members at the time of employment, and it's stored in a personal file. Your code of conduct should be reviewed annually. Here's an example of a child-safe code of conduct template and the guide on how to develop a child-safe code of conduct. The guide was developed by the Office of the Children's Guardian, and it's to support the implementation of the child-safe standards. So it explains the necessary components of a code of conduct. It describes the behaviours that may be included in them, which is both acceptable and unacceptable, and explains how these may be tailored to different organisational contexts. It also provides some information on current best practice implementations. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, and we're just going to quickly look at the first I will not. So if you have there an example of I will not is subject a child to any form of corporal punishment, social isolation, immobilization, sexual suggestion, offence or misconduct. So that's an example of I will not. If we go down and have a look at I will, an example of this is treat children with respect and be a positive role model in my conduct with them. Now, while this is a valuable guide, keep in mind that your code of conduct should be specific to your own family daycare services. Now, if you don't have one, your brain's pottering away and you're having a think, we have a question here to get that flowing. And my question is, what are the expected child-safe behaviours that can be included in your child-safe code of conduct? So you may want to use the chat and give me an example of I will not, or you may want to use the chat to give me an example of I will. So I'll just give you a minute or so. Now, we've also included this question here, and it says, how does your service demonstrate a commitment to keeping children safe? So this is a really good reflective question that you should have in the back of your mind. Perhaps you want to address it at your next staff meeting. But yeah, it's going to help you with your understanding and articulating your values and beliefs when it comes to child safety within your service. So we have a suggestion here. I will report any sort of abuse. Perfect. I will respect and provide equal opportunity to all children in my care. I will prioritize all children's needs. I will be respectful with the disclosure. I will show respect for diversity and range of abilities. And I will respect children's ideas and opinions. They are some fantastic suggestions, and definitely you should be using them towards your own code of conduct. Another one that I have here is I will not take or share photos of children without express written permission from their parents or carer. And I will be involved in yearly updates of the Child Safe Code of Conduct and self-assessment. I will monitor the use of online material and put procedures in place to stop children from accessing inappropriate material. Examples of this could be using child lock on iPads, disabling internet use, and being mindful of music and videos that you are playing for children. Standard 6, processes to respond to complaints of child abuse are child-focused. A child-focused complaint process supports children who are exposed to the risk of harm and encourages them to speak up. Children, families and staff know who to tell if they make a complaint of child abuse. Child-safe organisations respond by immediately protecting children at risk, and complaints are addressed promptly, thoroughly and fairly. All adults understand their reporting obligations, including to external authorities. Standard 6 links to Quality Area 5 and Quality Area 7. The objective of Standard 6 is to ensure that children are the priority when it comes to responding to complaints. All staff working with children must guarantee that all children's needs are prioritised when responding. The Royal Commission identified that some children disclose just small details of abuse to gauge adults' reactions. So this is where the importance and effectiveness of staff training comes into play to ensure that even the smallest disclosures are recognised, responded to and reported. Educators must pay close attention to any changes in child's behaviour and reactions to different staff members. So this can either indicate that the child has a preference or that there could be something wrong. Educators can provide child-friendly ways to make a complaint. For example, this may be through drawing, or you might have a small group discussion immediately following an incident. So providing children with opportunities to engage in these conversations will also help support their developing understandings of social justice and advocacy for others. We also have a responsibility to ensure children know who they can go to for help or with any concerns that they have, and they must know that they're not going to get into trouble for doing so. Child-safe cultures create environments where staff can identify and report suspected harm of children. So we need to look at if all staff are aware of the process of recording complaints and allegations. Here I've linked a template, and this is from the Office of the Children's Guardian, which you can implement in your service. This template is to help you record complaints in your organisation, and it's to be used in conjunction with your own child-safe complaints management policy. So again, this one is from the OCG. When it comes to complaints and reporting, this is an excellent poster from the OCG, and you should have this on display in your service. It shows families, staff and volunteers where and to whom they can make a report. Having this post on display also facilitates a culture of reporting, and it ensures that everyone is informed and knows their obligations and their rights. Reports often need to be made to more than one agency, as this chart explains. So if earlier in our polls you answered that you were a little bit unsure or not confident in reporting, then please take particular note of this resource. The QR code on the left-hand side is for further information about reporting, and the QR code on the right-hand side is to download the poster. Standard 7. Staff are equipped with knowledge, skills, and awareness to keep children safe through continual education and training. A child-safe organisation promotes continuous learning and provides regular ongoing education and training. Staff continually build their abilities to keep children safe. This standard relates to Quality Area 4, which is your staffing arrangements, and Quality Area 7, which is governance and leadership. Here are some ways that we can ensure that staff abilities around child protection are maintained and that they are up to date. So you could sign up to newsletters and websites to build your awareness on child safety. So you can sign up for websites such as the New South Wales Office of the Children's Guardian or the eSafety Commissioner, which is about safety around technology. Complete child protection training and complete a refresher course at least once a year. Ensure you understand your mandatory reporting obligations and adhere to these. Report any concerns about child safety within your service to the coordinator. Now, if you are an approved provider or a coordinator, what can you do to ensure that your educators are confident in their child protection procedures? So you could consider your educators' learning styles and offer multimodal training, which is different forms of delivery. So that might be face-to-face or electronic, or perhaps they prefer something printed. And these are used to ensure the diverse needs of different learners are supported. Consider language and cultural issues when planning training. So an example of this would be to not hold important training on Chinese New Year, for example. Keep a training register that includes dates, names of participants, and when the training content should be reviewed. Ask for feedback from participants about the quality and usefulness of the training. And do your educators know the difference between child protection and child safety? And are they aware of organisational abuse, or do they need more support? So this might be a reflective question that you ask them and gauge their response and then move on from there. Standard 8, physical and online environments minimise the opportunity for abuse to occur. A child-safe organisation adapts its physical environments to minimise opportunities for abuse to occur. Organisations offer a balance between visibility and children's privacy, creative play, and other activities. Child-safe organisations also address risks in the online environment by educating children and adults on how to avoid them and how to detect signs of online grooming. Now, this standard links to Quality Area 2, 3, 4, and 7. In family daycare services, it's not always possible for educators to be there physically in, for coordinators, to be there physically in educators' homes every day. So we need to look at some alternative ways to ensure the physical safety and supervision of these children is upheld. So as coordinators or approved providers, you should ensure there is a service policy that covers the creation of a child-safe culture and the safe use of online environments. You can conduct extensive risk assessments at the time of recruitment and consider all factors such as who lives in the home, who has access to where the children are, the physical environment, and visibility. So when we talk about visibility, this may be where the children are sleeping or where your nappy change procedures are happening. Policies and procedures are in place when visitors enter the home. Prioritize face-to-face visits as opposed to phone calls or Zoom calls. And ensure accurate record keeping, including making your own recordings of dates and times when other people in the house are home. So perhaps a family member is now working from home or they've lost their job. We need to consider how this affects the environment. You should be conducting regular spot checks. And of course, maintain good relationships with your educators to ensure strong partnerships and mentoring. And I've just had in the chat here from Hetty. Hetty has said safety audits are revised regularly. And that's an excellent point to add. Thank you, Hetty. Now we've touched on physical safety. Let's look at safety around technology. What policies and safeguards do you need to have around the use of safe technology in your family daycare service? So here I've linked a checklist, and this is from the Early Childhood Services around safe technology use. So you can use the checklist to identify any online risks and as a guide to improving the online safety practices of children and adults. The checklist is not intended to be exhaustive, but there may be some specific considerations that considerations in different contexts. So this checklist has been developed in consultation with the CEQA, and it's referenced to the NQS and the Early Years Learning Framework. So you can use it as evidence in your assessment and rating as well. A CEQA advises that a checklist such as this should be shared and discussed with educators to ensure it's understood by the whole team. Standard 9, implementation of the child safe standards is continuously reviewed and improved. Child safe organisations know it takes ongoing effort to maintain a safe environment for children. Leaders embed a culture of learning and put in place systems to monitor and evaluate how they have implemented the child safe standards. Staff keep up to date with emerging knowledge and trends to continuously improve practices and can demonstrate that policies and procedures have changed over time. This standard links to Quality Area 7, Governance and Leadership. Standard 9 is all about continuous improvement. Continuous improvement in family daycare services can look like annually reviewing your child safe policies and procedures and practices, particularly after critical incidences or more regularly if necessary. It's about ensuring your policies and procedures are informed by best practice, relevant legislation, and consider the needs of children in your care. Networking with other education and care services or organisations to share knowledge, experiences, and good practice ideas. So in family daycare, it's common to have meetups or playdates with your fellow family daycare educators. Now, this is a perfect opportunity for you to share your experiences and practices and ideas around child safety. Seeking feedback from families, staff, volunteers, students, and children about their experience of the complaint handling process, or their view more generally about your child safe practices and how this work is communicated. Then You must always act on that feedback where necessary. And for services where there may be staff working alone with children, like of course in family daycare services, giving particular attention to the review and continuous improvement process in relation to effective risk management in those contexts. Standard 10. Policies and procedures document how the organisation is child safe. Child safe organisations have policies and procedures that describe how they maintain a safe environment for children. They know that these documents are only effective if they are implemented. Policies and procedures should be relevant to all aspects of an organisation and reflect the child safe standards. They are championed by leaders, understood by staff, and they're available to the community in accessible formats and languages. Now, Standard 10 relates to Quality Area 6, Collaborative Partnerships with Families and Communities, and Quality Area 7, Governance and Leadership. It's important for all educators to be familiar with policies and procedures around child safety, but exactly what policies and procedures are we referring to? So some examples are a child safe environment policy, a code of conduct, supervision policy, child safe risk management policy, sleep policy. And this is because research has shown that sleep can be a high risk time for children in an unsafe environment. So we need to consider where are the children, what's the ratio, and is there visibility? There's a child safe human resources policy. So this is your recruitment process, which we've discussed. And that's about asking for the working with children's check number, verifying that, and having questions about child protection in your interview process. And ensuring that they do have current and up-to-date child protection courses or refreshers. Complaints handling. Does your complaints policy explain how children, educators and families can raise concerns? Risk management procedures, especially when hiring a new family daycare educator. And when you do a risk assessment of their home, you might want to consider environment setups. Are there any blind spots? Who else lives in the home? Do they have access to the children? And how often are they there? You should have a staff induction checklist. So when a new staff starts with you, your induction process should include making staff aware of child protection policies and procedures and where they are kept on your premises. You can have staff surveys about child policies and procedures to identify any gaps in knowledge and target training and support. Now, these are just some examples that you may have in your service, and also consider that sometimes they're called something else. So I'm going to launch a poll, and it's just a quick yes or no. And I'm going to give everyone about 30 seconds or so. And today, this poll is about your services, policies and procedures and ensuring that they cover child safety. Okay, I'm just going to give it 15 more seconds. If you don't have access to the poll, you're more than welcome to put it in the chat. Let's have a look. I'm ending the poll now and we can see our results. Here we go. So 99% of you said yes and 1% of you said no. So if you have answered no, you will need to identify where the gaps lie in your organisation's policies and procedures, and you can now take the steps to improve that. So remember, implementing the child safe standards did commence from the 1st of February 2023. So having the right policies and procedures on child safety is now mandatory. Another thing to consider is, does your service have a policy regarding the implementation of the standards, as well as the policies listed on the previous slide? And that's just something to reflect on. Now, if one of the policies you have identified as not having is the child safe policy, the Office of Children's Guardian have provided a template which I've linked here. So again, that's just the QR code down the bottom. And it is just a simple template that you can use. If you don't have access to the QR codes or they're not working for you, everything is linked in the booklet. Don't forget. So what are some things that we can do to ensure that staff and families understand all of our policies when it comes to child safety? So you could hold information nights, and the thing I love about family daycare is that you are really close with your families and you don't have many. So a nice intimate information night might work for you to share all of these ideas and policies and procedures. You could translate policies and procedures into different languages to meet the needs of culturally and linguistically diverse families and staff. As family daycare educators, you do have the advantage of close relationships with the children and families in your care, as I mentioned earlier. So you may even choose to have a one-on-one conversation and then just gauging and seeing if they have any further questions. Let's think, are reading policies a part of your induction process? So we've mentioned staff induction earlier and having a checklist. That could possibly be a point on your checklist. Now, this was a great idea that we came across during our research, and it was that family daycare managers start a private Facebook group to discuss child-safe policies and answer reflective questions with each other and other members of their provider. Now, this is a wonderful way to collaborate with one another and maintain a safe space for staff. So that brings us to the end of debriefing the 10 child safe standards. As you can see, there were a few overlaps between the standards, as we mentioned earlier, and that they should all be of equal importance and are interrelated. And keep in mind that these standards need to be applied to your service specifically. So it's not about ticking boxes and saying the right thing. All of our resources as well that we've provided today are free. So it's not about spending a lot of money. However, you may want to budget for a few extra resources. Now, it is important for family daycare services to understand that child safe standards should not be implemented in a one-size-fits-all manner. Instead, services should interpret these standards in a way that is consistent with your own culture, values, and specific context. So by doing so, you can ensure that the implementation of child safe practices is meaningful and relevant within your services setting. So now we're going to hear from Caryn Millward, and I had the pleasure of interviewing her. Now, Caryn is from the Office of the Children's Guardian, and she's going to be sharing more on child safety and equip us with some further knowledge and skills. And thank you for joining us today for our interview. I'm very pleased to introduce Caryn Millward. And Caryn is a team leader at the Child Safe team for the Office of Children's Guardian. She's here today to share some knowledge and strategies in implementing the child safe standards into family daycare services. So a very warm welcome to you, Caryn, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, thank you, everyone.
My name's Rachel, and I'm joining you from Gadigal country. Can I ask where you're joining us from?
I'm on Dharawal land today.
Wonderful. So to start off, could you tell us a little bit more about the child safe standards and how they were created?
Yeah, the Royal Commission into Institutionalised Responses to Child Sexual Abuse started in 2012 and ran until 2017. So it was 5 years where 42,000 calls were handled, more than 25,000 letters and emails were received at the Commission, and over 8,000 private sessions were held. There were more than 2,500 referrals to authorities made during and at the end of the Royal Commission. Based on its findings in 2017, the Royal Commission found that the child safe organisations create cultures, adopt strategies and take action to prevent harm and abuse to children. The 10 child safe standards were developed to provide a comprehensive framework for creating child safe organisations. If you'd like to learn more about the Royal Commission, how it was established and a bit about the process and the findings that they made, we have a podcast on our website, podcast number 1, and one of the Royal Commissioners actually speaks to us about his experience. And also just to add, the Royal Commission also made a recommendation to streamline child protection functions, which meant that the reportable conduct scheme, which was with the New South Wales Ombudsman's Office, was transferred to the Office of the Children's Guardian. That happened in 2020.
So we also know that the Child Safe scheme commenced on February 1st in 2022, and enforcement of the standards started on the 1st of February 2023. Can you describe how the Office of the Children's Guardian monitors services for compliance?
Of course. The compliance team is currently undertaking a pilot program, and they've already visited several early childhood services, including family daycare, to understand what child safe practices look in an early childhood context. To help services like family daycare successfully implement the standards, the OCG is focused on capability building. The OCG compliance team takes an educative, risk-based approach to regulation, which means they focus on areas where there is the greatest risk of harm to children and young people. Monitoring the standards within organisations will focus on how services are implementing the standards to keep children safe, but the approach will not be prescriptive, as the standards are principle-based, which means services have the scope to implement them in ways that best suit what they do. The compliance team may complete a monitoring and assessment of a service to find out if they are implementing the standards effectively. As part of the monitoring and assessment process, the compliance team may direct a service to complete the child safe self-assessment and provide child safe policies and procedures. They would also be expected to engage with the compliance team to discuss the implementation. The compliance team may also complete a monitoring assessment report to help a service improve its compliance with the child safe standards, and the service must respond to the recommendations made in the report. Further enforcement action would be taken if the service was not implementing the recommendations.
Thank you for sharing more about the compliance requirements of the child safe standards. I think that's really informative and important for our participants to know. In today's session, we've learned that having a child safe code of conduct is a vital child safe tool to keep children safe. Can you explain the need for a service to have a child safe code of conduct?
Of course. As part of the child safe scheme, the legislation prescribes a number of documents that a child safe organisation should have. One of those documents is the Child Safe Code of Conduct, which clearly outlines the behaviour and interactions that is acceptable and unacceptable between an educator and children. There are a number of ways a child safe organisation may design their code of conduct. It will depend on the size of the organisation. Some may have a code of conduct attached to their child safe policy, and others may have an extended child safe policy that includes a code of behaviour. However an organisation chooses to design it, a child safe code of conduct should be short in simple or easy to read English, describing the I wills and I will not statements of educator behaviour, and not use language that could be interpreted in different ways. For example, saying educators should behave professionally could be interpreted differently by different educators. In addition to educators, an organisation's child safe code of conduct should be shared with parents and carers and children and young people, so everyone in the organisation understands what the expectations are, and also so that they can identify if an educator breaches the code. For example, if a child knows that an educator cannot hit them, then they're more likely to go home and tell their parents. We do run skill builders and on how to create a code of conduct. So if any services need help with that or reviewing their code of conduct, please go to our website, which I think links are being shared, and sign up for a session.
So some of our family daycare educators watching here tonight may be alone with up to 7 children at one time. What advice do you have to them to ensure child safety while working in isolation?
We would advise them to work with New South Wales Family Daycare to make sure they stay up to date with contemporary child safe practices and support.
And some of us here tonight may be aware of the national principles for child safe organisations, but what is the difference between that and child safe standards? And do we need to implement both?
That's a good question. The national principles reflect the child safe standards recommended by the Royal Commission. Both the national principles and child safe standards expand on the types of harm and abuse captured to cover other types of harm and abuse in addition to child sexual abuse, including physical abuse, psychological abuse, grooming, misconduct, and lack of appropriate care. The biggest differences are that the child safe standards are state-based and legislated, while the national principles are national and they're not legislated. That means child safe organisations in New South Wales must implement the New South Wales child safe standards. The national principles, while recommended, cannot be enforced because they are not legislated. The OCG recognises that if organisations are implementing the national principles, then it would be implementing the New South Wales child safe standards.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Caryn, for taking the time to have a chat with us today. It was so informative, and I think our participants will gain such a great deal of knowledge and insight when it comes to implementing their own child safe standards to make their services child safe.
Great. Good luck, everyone.
So now that we have a little bit more of an understanding of the 10 child safe standards, a key framework we need to be aware of is the national principles for child safe organisations. And this is something that Caryn also touched on in her interview. So you may have seen this before, and as you can see, they are very similar to the standards that we have covered tonight. And that's because the national principles were derived from the standards. The national principles have a broader scope that goes beyond child sexual abuse to cover other forms of potential harm, such as psychological, emotional, and physical, as well as neglect. National, of course, means Australia-wide, where the child safe standards are specific to New South Wales. However, both the New South Wales child safe standards and the national principles describe the necessary elements for child safe practices. The Office of Children's Guardian considers that if you are implementing the national principles, you're also implementing the safe standards. Fitting it all together. So we know that there are many different frameworks and regulations and legislations in place around keeping children safe from harm in family daycare services. The standards are simply an extension of these guides. Now, I thought this image was a really great way to visualize the procedures and documents that do guide us on our journey in keeping children safe. So, of course, we've got belonging, being and becoming, which is our EYLF, our working with children's check laws, children's education and care regulations, and the child safe standards, which is what we know and we reference every day. So now that we know what the standards are, let's look at how we can assess how well we're doing in implementing them. The Child Safe Self-Assessment will assist your organisation in identifying areas of strengths and opportunities for improvement in how your organisation implements the New South Wales Child Safe Standards. It is a capability building resource to help improve child safe practice and to keep children safe from harm. The best thing about this Child Safe Self-Assessment is that it is available in 5 different languages, and it takes 30 minutes or less to complete. Here's a snippet of what the Child Safe Self-Assessment looks like. And what I can tell you is that it will ask you questions and details about your service, so including your ABN, and it will follow on with questions about leadership and culture, staff education and training, and how complaints about child safety are handled. From that, you will receive the results and an action plan. So it will identify gaps in the standards or what policies or procedures you might need. You can share these results with your coordinator to make the changes. Now, if throughout today's session, you've been thinking, where do I start? It's here. So completing this self-assessment is your step one. As we come to the end of our webinar tonight, I want to instill that the following values should remain at the heart of our approach in prioritising children's safety. The best interests of children and their protection from harm and hazard is paramount. Child abuse is not tolerated and must not happen. Children's rights are understood and respected. Concerns about child safety raised by children and their parents and carers are acted on, and reporting abuse is not obstructed or prevented. So now we're going to have a short break for you to complete a poll. Now, there are 6 short questions for you to reflect on what you've learned tonight. After this is completed, we'll then move into some question time, and I have a few questions that you have put in the Q&A box, which are wonderful, and I'm going to get around to answering some of those. So if you want, you can add some more questions to the Q&A now that we're at the end and you're thinking, oh, I need a bit more clarity on something, you are more than welcome. So here we go. This is our 6 recap questions, and I'm going to give everyone 2 minutes to answer this. Wonderful. So I'm just about to end the poll and let's have a look at the results. So here we are. Let's recap. Question 1. On the 1st of February 2023, the Child Safe Standards commenced. 86% of you said true, which of course is correct. As of this date, early childhood education and care services are required under the Child Safe Scheme to implement the Child Safe Standards. Question 2, whose responsibility is it to ensure that policies are in place for providing a child-safe environment? Now, 18% of you said families, 15% said New South Wales Police, 83% said approved providers, and 65% said educators, and the answer is approved providers. While educators do have a responsibility and a duty of care to ensure these policies are in place, ultimately it is the responsibility of the approved provider. Question 3. The Office of Children's Guardian can issue fines if organisations do not comply with the Child Safe Standards. Now, the answer to that is true. When organisations do not comply with the Child Safe Standards, the Office of Children's Guardian can issue a compliance notice to the organisation or accept an enforceable undertaking from the organisation. If an organisation fails to comply with the compliance notice or an enforceable undertaking, the Children's Guardian may commence issuing penalties. Question 4. How many child safe standards are there? 16% said 7, 81% of you said 10, 4% of you said 5, and 2% of you said 20. So of course the answer is 10, which 81% of you got correct. Well done. Now, question 5. Is it mandatory to have a child safe policy? 99% of you said yes, so give yourselves a clap. Wonderful. 1% said no. Now, it is mandatory because according to Regulation 168, approved providers must ensure policies and procedures are in place to keep children safe. And of course, our last question, which is the same question as we asked at the beginning of the poll, and it was, how confident do you feel about applying the child safe standards in your family daycare service? So 1% said not confident at all. 1% said not really sure what is required of me. 19% said aware of some procedures required, but not all. And 82% of you said, I'm very aware of the compliance. So well done. At our beginning poll, I think the number was 56% of you were confident. And now that we're at the end, 82% of you are confident. So that makes me so pleased, and I'm really happy to hear that. Now, if you were the 19% that said aware of some procedures required, but not all, please rewatch again if you missed something that you want to know more about, or you can read your booklet. And then if you still have some questions, I'm going to link some extra resources at the end that can help you on your journey. Now, question time here, and I have a few that came in on the Q&A that I'd like to clarify. Or I'd like to answer, sorry. So the first one I have received, it was, do you still have the Safe Book series? Now, if you look at your booklets, the link to the Safe Book series are in there, or if you rewatch this webinar again later, you can click on the QR code. Alternatively, they are available from the Office of the Children's Guardian website. So you can always have a search on there. And of course, it's called the Safe Book series, which are a wonderful resource. Now, another question that I have here is, could you please clarify, do all adult household members need a police check or only the educators? I'm aware that the Working with Children's check is required by all adult household members. So the reason that you do get a police check for all household members would be to make a strong statement in regard to your campaign in child safety. So it's about going above and beyond. Now, let me look at our next question. So I have another question here. Yep, and Kylie in the chat has added, sorry, better to have all, and Kylie has also said yes, they do. So another question that I have here, are providers allowed to do spot checks on days that educators don't have children and are not working that day? The answer to that is no. You are only allowed to do spot checks on your educators' hours of operation. So if they're open from 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m, you can do spot checks then. Any hours out of that is a no. I have another question here from Janelle, and Janelle has asked, do we need our own code of conduct as self-employed, or does our service do it for us? So your code of conduct should be created in conjunction with your CDO. And it is a working document that you both need to contribute to. So Janelle, you would be contributing your perspective of your code of conduct within your service. And let me just check if there are any other questions before we finish up tonight. That's all I have. But if you do have any burning questions that you would like the answer to, you are more than welcome to email info@nswfdc.org.au, and we are more than happy to help. Alternatively, there are additional resources here that you can always reference. So you may be able to find the answer yourself. Now, these additional resources are again from the Office of the Children's Guardian, and they have everything you need to become a child-safe organisation. So that includes policy templates, samples and resources from training programs, and links to other relevant organisations. Now, if you have started implementing your child-safe standards and you are still unsure, as Caryn mentioned, the Office of the Children's Guardian do have dedicated child-safe officers to provide support. So you can contact them via their email at childsafe@ocg.newsouthwales.gov.au or by visiting the website. And of course, your certificates will be emailed to you within a week. So they're not going to come instantly. It takes time to process. So they won't be in your inboxes by today or by tomorrow. But if within a week you've checked your junk mail and you still don't have it, please contact professional services at nswfdc.org.au. Well, that brings us to the end of today's session tonight, and I hope you've enjoyed it and that you've learned some new information to take away with you and reflect on your practice. This project is funded by the New South Wales Department of Education through the Sector Development Program. And please remember that you can also join us in our Facebook group. And if you haven't already, just open up your Facebook and type in PD in your pocket. Thank you everyone for participating tonight or watching or listening to this session via podcast or at another date from our website. But thank you again for joining us, and we will see you next month. Bye.